Jeremy Thatcher, Dragon Hatcher, Chapter 2, Strange Instructions. Jeremy wondered if the old man really was out of his mind. "A quarter," Mr. Elives said again, holding out his hand. Jeremy fumbled in his pocket. He wasn't sure he had a quarter. He wondered if the old man would accept 2 dimes and a nickel instead. Mr. Elives was so weird, it was hard to tell. The old man frowned. Jeremy felt both relieved and frightened when his fingers finally closed on a quarter. "Here," he said nervously, holding up the coin. Mr. Elives snatched it away. "Stand still," he said. "I have to get something." Jeremy stood. In fact, he felt as if his feet had been frozen to the floor. He had no idea how much time went by before the old man returned carrying a yellow piece of paper, which he folded into a square, then tucked into the box next to the sphere. He handed the box to Jeremy. Then he reached forward, grabbed him by the shoulders, and looked straight into his eyes. Only after a few seconds, Jeremy wanted to break the stare down. To his horror, his eyes seemed to be locked in place. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't look away. "Follow the instructions exactly. And for istakes, be careful. If you fail to care for this properly, you will have me to answer to." Then, as if the whole situation were an annoyance he wanted to be done with, he snapped, "Take the side door. It will get you home faster." Clutching the box, Jeremy ran to the door. When he stopped to look around, he found himself on Maple Street. What? Not far from his house. "How did I get here?" he thought. For the life of him, he could not remember. One minute, he'd been in this weird shop. The next, here he was, less than a block from his home. At least he was safe. Howard and Freddie rarely came this far from the center of town. Of course, living out here meant Jeremy had to walk further to get to school than most of his friends. But the fact that he had a backyard that was more like a back field made up for it. The place had been a working farm once, and his father, who was a veterinarian, used the main barn as his office. Jeremy tucked the box under his arm. Watching carefully for Howard, Freddie, or Mary Lou, he crossed the street and headed for his front door. When he entered the house, he nearly was overwhelmed by Grief, which was his family dog, a golden retriever. The bounding dog greeted him with an explosion of enthusiasm that almost knocked the box out of his hand. "Down, Grief!" he yelled as he battled his way past the big dog's thumping goodwill. "Down!" Grief paid no attention, but then he never did. Jeremy sighed. His parents had a small kid. Why couldn't they have a small dog? Holding the box over his head, he finally managed to put it safely on top of the piano. Then he led the bouncing dog to the kitchen, which, as usual, was occupied by a surprising number of cats. Sliding one of the cats away from the pantry door, Jeremy found a chew bone. He tossed it to Grief, who ran off happily. Retrieving the box, Jeremy headed up the stairs. A pile of clean clothes blocked his doorway. His mother had been leaving his laundry outside his door ever since the morning 3 months ago, when she had stepped into a vat of paper mache that was sitting in front of his dresser. "Driving to work every day is dangerous enough," she had told Jeremy. "I don't need to be surprised by trying to cross over your floor." He stepped over the laundry and closed the door behind him. Though he was eager to examine the sphere and the paper that the man had given him with it, "I'm leaving. I love you." A chorus of eager squeaks told Jeremy that his animals needed to be fed. With a sigh, he placed the box on his desk and started the rounds of his room. peering into each of the dozen or so small cages that lined the shelves of his room. He made sure that the mice, gerbils, hamsters, and guinea pigs all had food and water. The guinea pigs, who already had plenty of food, wouldn't stop shrieking until he gave them more. Okay, animals fed. Jeremy sat down to study the ball. Shoving aside a stack of unfinished drawings, he placed the box in the center of his desk and took off the lid. It's like a kaleidoscope, he thought, as the colors swirled in the light of his desk lamp. Except you don't need to look through a tube to see it. Marveling that the old man had sold him such a wonder for only a quarter, Jeremy reached out to touch its glossy surface. With a cry of surprise, he pulled his hand back. The ball was warmer than before. Eyeing it nervously, Jeremy unfolded the paper that the man had given him tucked into the box. Probably directions for keeping it clean, he thought to himself, as he spread the paper out on his desk. But when he looked at it, he blinked in surprise. A picture of a dragon stretched up the left side and around the top corner of the page. A burst of flames extending from the dragon's mouth separated into fiery letters that said, how to hatch a dragon's egg. Jeremy frowned. What kind of fool does this old man think I am? The whole situation was ridiculous, but also intriguing. So he decided to read the rest of the page. Here's what it looks like. I'll keep that showing for you. Which had been written by hand in a script that was loose and spidery. How to hatch a dragon's egg. The egg you have just purchased has already gone through a long aging process. It now needs but two things to be ready to hatch: the light of a full moon and the words of a true friend. To quicken the egg, take it outside at midnight on the night of the next full moon. Lift it to the moonlight and whisper, full moon's light to wake the egg, full moon's light to hatch it. Midsummer night will crack the world, but St. John's Day will patch it. Expose the egg to the moonlight for at least 3 hours. Then await the results. You have been entrusted with a very special creature, Jeremy Thatcher. Treat it with care, for its safety depends upon your willingness to follow these directions exactly. It goes without saying that secrecy is essential. Good hatching. Signed, S.H. Elives. Jeremy felt the hairs on the back of his neck begin to prickle. How did the old man know my name? He wondered. He was sure he had never mentioned it. Hey, Bub, said a voice, making him jump. The voice came from a speaker mounted on the wall next to his desk, part of the intercom system that his dad installed during the last burst of what his mother called Herbert's occasional electronic enthusiasms. Hey, Bub, he repeated again. Are you there? I'm here. Well, you shouldn't be. You should be here, getting your chores done. Despite the admonishing words, Dr. Thatcher's voice was cheerful. Be right there. Trying to sound enthusiastic, Jeremy replied. Slipping the instructions under a pile of his drawings, Jeremy headed out of his room and down the stairs. With grief bouncing at his heels, he ambled down the winding driveway, past the pair of small barns to his father's veterinarian office. Stepping inside, Jeremy found his father shoving vitamins into a ferret. "Hold still! Hold still!" crooned Mr. Thatcher to the squirming mass of brown and yellow fur that was in his hands. "Ah, there's a love!" Jeremy reached out to take the ferret from his father. "Hey, kiddo," said his father, handing over the animal. "How was your day?" Jeremy put the ferret on his shoulder. The action gave him a chance to think about what his father had asked. Complicated, he said at last, squirming a bit as the little animal licked his ear. Dr. Thatcher raised an eyebrow, his way of questioning for more information. "Well, for one thing, Mary Lou Hutton wants to kiss me." Dr. Thatcher wrinkled his nose. That's what you get for being so cute." "I'm not cute." "Okay, you're ugly. Put Farah in her cage and go feed the cats. I've got one more patient to see before I can knock off for the night." Jeremy caged the ferret, then found the cat food and began filling the dishes. In the next to last cage crouched an enormous orange and white cat with tattered ears and a swollen eye. "Hey, Pete, how you doing?" said Jeremy. The cat, whose full name, according to his owner, was Fat Pete Porcus Extremus, was in the office at least once a month. He was always getting stitched up after his fights. While today's eye problem was new, tattered ears had been the way for this cat for years. Jeremy reached through the bars to scratch behind Pete's ears. The cat responded by clawing his hand. Jeremy pulled back. "Why, you rotten—" "Jeremy," called his father from the other room. "What's the rule?" Jeremy sighed. There's no sense in getting mad at a cat for being a cat. He knew it was true, but he stuck his tongue out at Pete anyway. After all the animals were fed, Jeremy and his father walked back to the house. The sky was dark with clouds, and in the distance they could hear the rumble of thunder. When's the next full moon?" Jeremy asked his father as they reached the back door. Dr. Thatcher, who was apt to burst into song whenever something reminded him of a lyric, threw back his head and sang, "Full moon's bringing empty heart." "Dad," Dr. Thatcher paused. "I don't know. But it can't be long. Go get today's newspaper and find out." "I don't think a full moon counts as big news, Dad." "Just get the paper." Jeremy got the paper. His father showed him the almanac on the inside of the first page of the newspaper. It told when the sun came up, when it was going to set, what time the moon rose, and what time the moon set, and other equally trivial things. "They're not so trivial when you want to know them. Anyway," he continued, "to answer your question, the next full moon is tonight." "Tonight?" Dr. Thatcher glanced at his watch. Starting in about 2 hours, assuming it doesn't rain." Jeremy swallowed. He didn't really believe the thing upstairs was an egg, but if he wanted to know for sure, he'd have to start tonight. Either that or wait another entire month. Leaving his father, he went upstairs to look at the ball. He picked it up and held it for a moment. It was warmer than ever. Pulling out the directions, he made up his mind. Tonight, he would try to hatch an egg.